Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to try and explain something we've all struggled with. Is it ever actually good to lie? Now, on the surface, that sounds like a pretty simple question. But believe me, it gets incredibly complex the more you dig into it. It's a real dilemma, one that forces our deepest moral instincts to clash, making us ask what we really value more, sticking to absolute principles or getting the most compassionate outcome.
You know, from the time we're kids, we have this rule drilled into us. Honesty is the best policy. It's sold to us as this foundational truth for building relationships, for having a society that actually works. And yet, I think we've all been in those awkward situations where telling the complete, unvarnished truth just feels, well, wrong, where it might be incredibly unkind or maybe even flat out dangerous. So how are we supposed to navigate that? This constant tug of war between the moral pull of honesty and the messy, complicated reality of our lives.
And look, this is not a new problem, not by a long shot. This tension between telling the truth and using deception has been a major battleground for philosophers, for theologians, for thinkers, for thousands of years. It's really a core human dilemma that every single generation has to wrestle with all over again, because the answers we come up with say so much about how we see the world and our place in it. So let's dive in and explore some of the most powerful arguments that have shaped this timeless debate.
Okay, so before we can even think about the exceptions, we really have to get a handle on the rule itself. Why is honesty valued so much everywhere? Why do we just, by default, condemn lying? Well, the answer comes down to the single most critical ingredient for any society to function, the very glue that holds us all together, and that's trust. Think about it. At its very core, honesty is the bedrock that our social world is built on. It's like a bridge that connects us to other people. Every single interaction we have, whether it's buying a cup of coffee or starting a new friendship, it all relies on this basic assumption that the bridge of trust is solid. If we couldn't trust what other people say, that bridge will just crumble. Widespread lying wears away at that trust, and it creates suspicion and chaos, making it basically impossible to cooperate. So the rule against lying isn't just some arbitrary thing, it's the very foundation of how we live and work together.
But what if this rule is absolute? I mean, what if there are zero exceptions? No gray areas, no situations where a lie could possibly be justified. Well, some of history's greatest thinkers have argued for exactly that a lie is always wrong, full stop, no matter the circumstances or your intentions. Let's really explore this tough, uncompromising, absolutist point of view.
Probably the most famous and forceful supporter of this absolutist view was the philosopher Immanuel Kant. And his argument goes way deeper than just, hurting someone's feelings. For Kant, every single lie, no matter how small or well-intentioned you think it is, does fundamental damage to humanity itself. He believed it vitiates, which is a fancy word for pollutes or corrupts, the very source of what is right, essentially poisoning the well of truth that all of our moral principles come from.
Kant's whole argument is built on this really powerful and deep idea, human dignity. He believed that what makes us special, what gives us our built-in worth, isn't how much money we have or status, but our ability to reason. We're unique because we can think, we can make free choices, we can set our own goals and guide our own lives rationally. And to act ethically, Kant said, is to respect this amazing power of rational free choice, both in ourselves and in every single other person.
So building on that idea of human dignity, Kant gives us two big reasons why lying is always wrong. First, he says, when you lie, you actually undermine your own rationality, the very thing that gives you your moral worth. You're acting against your own dignity. And second, when you lie to someone else, you're treating them like a tool, just a means to get what you want. You manipulate them and you rob them of their ability to make a free, rational choice based on the real facts. You are fundamentally disrespecting their dignity as a person.
So for Kant, it's simple. There are no exceptions. Even a supposedly good lie is a moral violation. And this brings us to the ultimate stress test for his whole theory. You've probably heard of it, the famous murder at the door thought experiment. A killer is at your front door, hunting down your friend who is hiding inside your house. The murderer asks you, point blank, "Is your friend in there?" Well, according to Kant's super strict view, you cannot lie. And this extreme dilemma, it just forces us to confront the other side of the argument head on.
And this is where a totally different way of thinking comes into play: utilitarianism. For utilitarians, abstract moral rules like never lie aren't really the most important thing. What truly matters are the real-world results, the tangible outcomes, the consequences of our actions.
And this just highlights the massive difference between these two views. The Kantian absolutist, they focus on the act itself. Lying is just wrong, period, and what happens after doesn't change that moral fact. But the utilitarian consequentialist, they're looking at the bigger picture. For them, an action's morality is decided by its outcome. So, in the case of the murder at the door, saving a life clearly produces the greatest good and minimizes harm. So, from a utilitarian perspective, lying isn't just okay, it's the morally required thing to do.
This whole approach is often called situation ethics. Philosophers call it a teleological theory, which just means it's focused on the telos, or the end goal. So instead of rigid black and white rules that apply to every situation, situation ethics says that every moral decision has to be judged based on its own unique circumstances. And what's the ultimate goal? To choose the action that creates the most loving outcome, which means a selfless, compassionate concern for other people.
Now, this fundamental clash between absolute rules on one side and situational outcomes on the other, it's not just something you find in philosophy textbooks. It's a tension that has echoed through the major world religions for thousands of years, as they've tried to give people moral guidance on how to live a good life.
When we look across different faith traditions, we find this exact same complex negotiation going on. In Christianity, the commandment against bearing false witness is a big deal. Thinkers like Augustine took a really hard line, a lot like Kant, arguing that a lie is always a sin. But there's an equally strong tradition that argued lying to save a life wasn't just permissible, but it was the righteous thing to do. Judaism generally forbids lying, but it makes explicit exceptions to keep the peace, or most importantly, to save a life, a core principle called pikuach nefesh. Similarly, Islam strongly condemns dishonesty but allows for exceptions to save a life or to bring people together. And in Buddhism, the idea of right speech encourages you to stay away from lies as part of a bigger path toward wisdom.
Now, one specific concept within these discussions that gets misunderstood and even weaponized a lot is the Islamic principle of taqiyya. So it's really important to understand what it actually is. Taqiyya is not some kind of license for general deception, which is how it's sometimes portrayed. Its origin and its use are very specific. It's a ruling that allows a believer to hide their faith when they are under a direct threat of persecution or death. It is fundamentally a tool for self-preservation when you're facing mortal danger.
All right, so we've explored the philosophy and the theology of this question. Now, let's bring this ancient debate right into our modern world, where it plays out with very real and often very expensive legal and social consequences.
In the world of business, for instance, deception can be incredibly costly. A really common example is something called false reference pricing. This is when a store advertises a fake original price to make a sale price look like an amazing deal, when in reality, the item was never actually sold at that higher price. Well, regulators see this as a clear lie to deceive customers, and the penalties can be huge. JCPenney had to pay $15 million to settle a class action lawsuit over this exact practice.
And on a more personal level, our views on honesty are often tied up really deeply with our identities. A Pew Research survey from 2016 in the US really highlights this connection. It found that for 2/3 of all Christians, being honest at all times is considered an essential part of who they are. And for those who identify as highly religious, that number jumps up to a whopping 81%. This just goes to show how central that principle of absolute honesty still is as a core value for so many people today.
Okay, so after digging through ancient philosophy, religious tradition, and modern law, we kind of arrive back where we started, facing the most important question of all. What do we do with all this? How does any of this help us make choices in our own lives?
We've seen that this entire debate really boils down to a fundamental conflict of our duties. Is your main duty to an abstract moral rule like never lie? Or is your main duty to the people around you to get the most compassionate result? That murder at the door scenario makes this conflict painfully clear. When those two principles crash into each other, which one do you pick? The principle of honesty or the principle of compassion?
At the end of the day, these frameworks, Kantian absolutism, utilitarianism, the guidance from faith, they're not really meant to give you a simple one-size-fits-all answer. A better way to think of them is like tools, or maybe like different lenses. Understanding them helps you see the different moral layers of a difficult choice. They equip you to think with more clarity and purpose as you navigate the world with your own moral compass.
And this really brings us to the final personal challenge. This isn't just some abstract puzzle for philosophers to debate in a classroom somewhere. It's a question that cuts right to the very core of who we are and what we value most. When a principle you hold deeply, like honesty, clashes with the urgent need to stop a tragic outcome, the choice you make doesn't just resolve the situation. In a very, very real way, it reveals your character. It shows what, for you, is the ultimate foundation of morality. And that's a question that only you can answer. Thanks so much for your time and for watching the whole video. I would love to hear your opinions about it, so comment down below.
And hey, share any experiences you've had with this, and also let me know what topic I should talk about next. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like it, and click that little notification bell icon so you get notified when I upload my next video. Have a good day, and bye for now.